You should have noted that we have started looking at a new section of data analysis. So this we are left with the last section, which will focus on communicating. No, I think we might be left with two or so. There's one that has to do with communicating the results. I just forgot the other one, whether that is the same as the compiling the research report. I think it is the same as communicating, but we'll verify if we still have two. And we we just did not do the other session that we will see how we will do it. Practical steps in data analysis. The way these sessions are arranged is that they start from they are steps that build up on one another. The first step, in other words, should be the first step. Then we go logically from step one up to the last step of analyzing data. If you go to books, people use different terminologies when they talk about data analysis, and the option is open. And what I do, I use the most basic concepts, or the most basic concepts, so that I don't complicate the process for myself. And what is important is what is inside what I do, not necessarily what I call it, but as long as the terminology that I use is acceptable within the paradigm of research. So as long as it makes sense and it is scientifically accepted, then I will go for the most simplest, the most basic one. The two sources that we have consulted today is one by Yin, 2016. The second one is Radhika and Kakat's 2021. I have mainly used Yin and Kakat's, Radhika and Kakat's, where I've supported the presentation. And I want to disclose that last year I was using Radhika and Kakat's, and in one of the workshops, the participants expressed in concern that they were not understanding the presentation. And when I tried to explain, it was still not very clear. Then I went back, I changed. I'm no longer using Radhika and Kakat's. I'm using Yin. And when I did not come here on Tuesday, I was not happy with the preparation. I had to revise, and today I'm going to share with you part of that revision. I also want to indicate that from this month workshops, we've got workshop 6 and 7. I've put in workshop 6 a case study of ethics, and I think we have been speaking with Abel, that Abel, because he recommended that, he stated that there was an interesting case study on ethics. So I've given him an opportunity. He said at least in the 3rd week of the month. That is what I've done on the in the 6th workshop. I just forgot the date, but we can verify. If Abel is here, we can discuss it before we disperse. But on the 8th one, I've put Stanford so that he can make a presentation, quantitative perspective. So a quantitative research from the engineering perspective. That is if all of them are still available and they are happy to do the presentations. And do confirm when I pause if you are ready. And before we leave here, let's go. Let's know that, let's understand if those days are still good for you. But colleagues, the analysis of qualitative data usually moves through 5 phases, the first 3 of which we should be covering in this workshop. I've looked at these phases and I noted that they are very long. We might only do one or maybe half of the other, then we will see how it goes. This is in accordance with information that I got from Yin. So the first analytic phase, which is compiling data into a formal database, calls for the careful and methodic organization of the original data. We remember, we depart from a point that we have been collecting data in the field. In one of the workshops, we noted and we were looking at how you record data. One of the statements is that data should be recorded verbatim. So we are going to pretend as if we have recorded data or we've collected data from the field. And the context of this workshop is based on that. So the author is speaking to people who should understand that they've collected data. Amongst you, there might be people who have already collected data and they've done data analysis. Some of you are still in the field, are collecting data, have not yet done data analysis. Some of you are still in other chapters before fieldwork, and they make reference to data collection from chapter 1, particularly when they talk about the design and the plan, the research plan, that after data collection, then data analysis will follow. So those people who have gone into the field and those that are in the field, we request you to share with us your experiences. But those that are not yet in the field, you can present how you understand data analysis in terms of the methods that you have chosen as part of your data analysis strategies or techniques. But the second phase, which we're not going to deal with today, I don't think we will do that, is called deassembling the data in the database. Can involve a formal coding procedure, but does not need to. So you can code or you cannot code, but you would be in a stage called disassembly. The third phrase, which is reassembling, is less mechanical and benefits from a researcher's insightful in seeing imaging patterns. That is when the researcher has started to understand, to get more insight of what has happened in the data as a whole. Because the two preceding phases we have ensured that the researcher is familiar with the data. So he would be in this third phase, which would be less mechanical. Now, but Yin knows that the researcher has a choice to use the computer software to analyze qualitative data, which I will not deal with here, but there are slides, I think I might have included 2 or 1 slides that make reference to the use of computer data analysis. And I want to say that to me, I don't think that it is necessary that people should be forced to use computers to analyze data. But I also do think that universities they've got the latitude to encourage the use or the combination use of manual and computer-aided technology, artificial intelligence in data analysis. I, for one, do not prefer the use of artificial intelligence. But the most important aspect is that one should be able to analyze data, whether you do it using computer or it is manual. But with computer, you will see that they say it takes time because you must learn how to use the technology. Otherwise, you're going to ask somebody to do analysis for you with the use of the software. When you do that, you will pay. And you see now the challenge with me is that when somebody does your work, does work for you, then it is no longer you. Although it will be considered as yours, but I feel that if somebody is doing something for me, then it is no longer me doing it. That is where I downplay the use of technology in data analysis. But somehow you're going to amass and sort all your qualitative data in some efficient manner. You have data that you would have collected would be many, and it will be just haphazard, be disorganized, because when you're collecting data, you're not um, taking notes or recording it in the, you're not necessarily formally analyzing it. You are analyzing it, you're not formally analyzing data. So data would be scattered all over and will be contained in your thick documents. And if it has been recorded, it is there recorded as per the way in which responses were provided. And sometimes if it is not yet transcribed, it means it is in its original form. Even if it has been transcribed, it is in its original form, the way it was presented to the researcher during fieldwork. So this is the data that we are talking about that needs to be analyzed. So that analysis means a lot to do with arranging it, organizing it in a way that it should be meaningful and provide a good report. You are going to follow some instructional cookbook that makes your procedure methodic. And this analytic process will lead directly to your ability to draw the needed findings for your study and to write them up. The preceding scenario can produce two opposing reactions. And the the point of using an instructional cookbook, they are showing you that books prescribe on how data should be analyzed, or they provide guidelines on how data should be analyzed. But by clever people, by the way, people like Ian would tell you that there is no universal way or an accepted method or approach in analyzing data, because people analyze data differently, and there are different ways of analyzing data, and people approach data analysis from different world views. They've got their own experiences. So you cannot prescribe to anybody how data should be analyzed, but some people might think that it is important to analyze. The preceding scenario can produce two opposing reactions. First, some people wish that the scenario was true, that there should be an instructional cookbook. They even may believe that by using computer software and specifically designed to analyze qualitative data, they will find the needed sanctuary. And the second one is, other people know that the scenario is not true, that we should have instructional books. However, they revel at the opportunity presented by qualitative research and the freedom not to be encumbered by some fixed methodology. In other words, we should be allowed freedom to make choices or to analyze data in the way that we deem it fit in terms of our own understanding. So we can follow our own intuition in the way that we feel comfortable. But whichever view you embrace, and however you end up at analyzing your data, the most important part of the scenario is the part about methodicness. And methodicness is described here. I've got an extract from Yin, how he explains what methodicness is. Now, let's look at what the criteria or the requirements of it are. For an example, during analysis, the methodicness comes in part by exercising three precautions. One, checking and rechecking the accuracy of your data so that you eliminate bias. Don't be selective and don't write data that is not accurate. So we ensure that by checking and rechecking. But second, making your analysis as thorough and complete as possible, rather than cutting corners and choose some part of the data with leaving some data out. Now, third, continually acknowledging any unwanted biases imposed by your own values when you are analyzing your data. Colleagues, you remember that we always talk about the worldview or the paradigm that everybody has got history and everybody has got his own preferences. There is a way in which he sees research and the way in which he understands the way of doing research. So this leads to him influencing the direction where research goes. So sometimes this might lead into the element of bias. That is why quantitative researchers have established rules, and they rigidly want research to be conducted so that they ensure objectivity, to eliminate the element of bias and to ensure that the data is not polluted. So in qualitative research, because most of it is in text, it is in written, the possibility of data being polluted and the introduction of bias is very, very high. So if we continue to observe the three recommendations and eventually continually acknowledging any unwanted biases, then we will be able to analyze our data methodically, because this is the requirement for methodicness in terms of Yin. And this is how Yin describes, or he explains, what methodicness is. He says a second craft objective is to do qualitative research methodically. That is methodicness. Methodically, or with what this book refers to as a methodicness. There needs to be adequate room for discovery and allowance for unanticipated events. So new information should emerge and should not be thrown away. And the events that emerge is what we want, because data is not what we have. It's what should emerge and come to inform the study based on the research questions that we have. However, being methodic means following some orderly set of research procedures and minimizing whimsical or careless work. We should be methodic. We need to follow procedures that are there so that we cannot be careless. We minimize whimsical or careless work. Whether a study is based on an explicitly defined research design or on a more informal but nonetheless rigorous field routine. So here we want an explicit research design, because this is what we have done in chapter 1. We designed the research plan that would inform us, that will navigate us as we go through, we undertake our research journey. That is what we need to follow. And if we follow that one explicitly, we believe that it would be part and parcel of instituting methodicness in that study. Being methodic includes avoiding unexplained bias or deliberate distortion in carrying out research. Distortion in order to fulfill own ambitions or own assumptions or own preferences is not actually what we must avoid that. If we do that, we are closer to methodicness. Finally, being methodic also means bringing a sense of completeness to a research effort, as well as cross-checking a study's procedure and data. This is what was summarized in the previous slide. So this is in accordance with Yin. And if you observe this, then we are methodically conducting research or analyzing data. To be avoided is leaving the impression that you might have selectively analyzed your data. You must not create that impression that you have selected some data, you have left some data out. The threat, otherwise the research is not rigorous. It has got elements of bias. It is not valid, it's not reliable. The threat arises because of qualitative research's highly textual nature. A lot of it is narrative, is speeches, is discussions, and that on its own is open for bias, because the interpretation can be based on the understanding of the researcher, thereby being unable to avoid the element of bias. For instance, you don't want to appear to have attended to some of your participants' words and phrases while downplaying others, or to have colored your analysis somehow with preconceptions you had before collecting your data, or to have concluded what you wanted to conclude in the face of some evidently text to the contrary. In other words, here they indicate that you would then steer the study towards your preconceptions or towards what you have concluded. In other words, you concluded the outcomes before the outcomes, and even before collecting data, even before analyzing. So when you see that data does not go towards your direction, and there is different evidence that does not support your preconceptions, then you downplay those so that you can only select those statements that support your preconceptions or those conclusions that you have had just before the study. Most peer reviewers know how to watch for such biases and wish that authors would try harder to avoid them. And I can also tell you that simply I can also see that you will find that a person will only defend the direction that he wants, and when there are other contradicting statements or other statements that point to a different direction, those are downplayed even if they are there. So this is a way in which reviewers catch researchers or they catch students. So the research study does not achieve the objective and it does not succeed. Specific techniques discussed later in these workshops will help and should be fully utilized, such as making constant comparisons. We'll look at this later on, but not today. Being especially alert to negative instances, also important. Developing rival explanations, which is very, very important. You need to look at the cons and pros. You look at statements that support a specific assumption or those that discredit it. So you do a comparative analysis between those that are anti and those that are pro. The findings would be in those two fashions. So analyzing means that you look at two of them and provide a way forward, your intuition. And continually posing questions about your data and to yourself as you proceed analytically. You must ask a lot about this data. What are there new things coming out? Is this what I had thought earlier on? Or is there something that is contradicting? Or is there something that is positive? Then that is what is going to assist the researcher. Keeping, organizing, and reviewing methodological notes or memos about the analytic process also is a strongly recommended practice. While you're analyzing, you need to note anything, any surprises that come out, any strange things that come out, things that confirm, things that are outside the context, anything that is there, you can record. And this will assist you in analyzing, and it assists you to understand data, the data as a whole, if outcomes of the study as a whole. All these procedures are important because the absence of a universal accepted analytical routine makes qualitative research highly vulnerable to accusations of selectivity and bias. So we are encouraged to actually follow those procedures because they are safety nets. They are those that protect the studies, they protect the researcher from criticism, and they actually ensure that the researcher does not introduce an element of bias in this research project. And I want to stop here. This is just the introduction that I've done. Later on, we're going to go. Today, we will be able to see and understand what the first stage of compiling data is about or it entails. But so far, we've just done an introduction to what this author says about data analysis. Say we've been warned, so we have been warned and we've been cautioned, and with a number of some concepts and procedures being introduced as safety nets to ensure that we succeed in ensuring that we have got rigorous outcomes from the research project.
I'm just trying to find the difference between quanti and quali methods of data analysis. The reason why I'm asking this question is that I am utilizing mixed method of study. So I still battle a bit to try and find the disjuncture between the two. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody who wants to try and respond?
If I may ask, what type of a mixed method are you using? Sequential, exploratory, explanatory, or convergence?
It's convergent. Thank you.
Convergence. Okay. So in terms of your data analysis, you can actually analyze once you are done. So I'm not exactly sure whether you'll be using just one method of collecting tools, or maybe simultaneously you are using a survey and what do you
It's
call this
parallel.
thing? No, but what I'm saying is, what tools are you using? Is it going to be a semi-structured interviews, focus group, or is just a questionnaire survey?
No, it's not one, it's actually multiple of. So there is questionnaires, there is focus group discussions, and surveys.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. If you don't mind
Complex.
my asking, why so much?
One of the limitations, or um, one of the ways, oh, it's I'm trying to close the gap or the limitation that was caused by the fact that the study from the literature that I'm currently doing has been done only using quali. So quantitative, there's limitations onto the outcomes of that. Actually, I have actually cut out because I had 4 initially, and I'm now left with 3 because I noticed that it's a little bit too much, and I might not be in a position to handle that.
Yes, I think even maybe 3 could be a lot. My advice for now, ne, maybe have a session with a supervisor who's very good, or a lecturer who's very good with the quantitative side. Have
Mhm.
your question and interview guides and anything else validated, and then hopefully there you'll be able to get guidance in terms of how you can um, proceed, and especially on the aspect of data analysis. Yeah, I think that's the 2 cents worth of advice that I can give you, because already using three tools, it sounds like it's a little bit too much. And then with convergence, obviously there's a stage once you've completed, then you need to analyze. But whatever it is that you are implementing, it needs to be guided by your research questions and your objectives. That's the other thing. So maybe having a non-biased eye looking at your work.
I actually missed the 3 data collection tools. You mentioned a survey. Did you use a questionnaire? Did you use an interview guide? And the other one is
No, it's a survey, it's a interview guide, and it's hey, what is the third one now? I don't know. It's in my mind. But there's
questionnaire and
3.
interview guide. And you see, uh, no, you want us to talk about how to analyze, but let us say in convergent, it means you are collecting data simultaneously, parallel,
Well,
and your
yes,
data need to be analyzed separately. But when
correct.
then you consolidate it at the end, isn't it? That is
That's
what
correct.
convergence mean.
Mm-hmm.
And it means you would have analyzed your qualitative data qualitatively.
Mm-hmm.
And we believe that you have explained in chapter 1 or in the design, no,
Mm-hmm.
either in chapter 1 or 3 or 4, in your design, you would have indicated uh, this is the data analysis methods. Would you do categories, you would do themes, or you would do discourse analysis, or whatever. All those things that you would have mentioned there. That is what you need to follow separately before considering the quantitative. If you are starting with the qualitative, but if you start with the quantitative, then do quantitative in its own way. You would have said you would use statistically, whatever, in that fashion. So quantitative data and qualitative data supplement each other only after all of them have been analyzed separately in terms of the convergence parallel or parallel convergent. That is what I can say. I'm not good at quantitative data, but in qualitative data, you will see the steps that they were describing today here. It's what you would also do, you would do for your qualitative data. But in terms of the quantitative data, those are the numbers, and you sometimes analyze them statistically. And I think you do have softwares that something that I hate a lot in quantitative data. You must subject your findings to a software. So I'm not an IT, an AI person, but
The
I
reason,
don't.
Doc, why I asked this question is because you really emphasized the issue of utilization of softwares. So
Yes.
that is how I stepped out of the current situation that I am to say, what does this mean to me? That is why I ended up using throwing this question. So I think Nomhle has already confirmed as well. And now you're making it even easier for me to actually find my feet. I'm appreciative because this is a confirmation of the fear that I had. To say there's nothing to fear. You start this. These are the steps. I'm quite very content. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. I have used mixed methods, and by the way, I did not use a software. The only software that I used was a calculator. It might have been in 1997, 98, 99, and 2000. How long was it? 23 years ago or so. I did. I collected data, used an embedded um, design of the mixed methods approach. There, I was collecting data together simultaneously, qualitative and quantitative. I would ask a quantitative question, and are there areas that are still protected in terms of the vendor culture? Yes, that has been quantitative. But I said, how are these areas protected? Now, I needed an explanation to expatiate to support the quantitative response. So for me, when I was analyzing data, then I would go and work out how many people have said yes and have said I don't know or otherwise. Then I use my calculator to count how many they are and what percentage they constituted. Then I would go to the motivation from a qualitative perspective that, those that have said that the process of protecting the natural environment is still available, or this is how it is done, then they explain. Then I show that the qualitative and the quantitative data is actually supportive of each other. The difference, how you analyze them, the other one is numbers, the other one is words, is descriptions, is explanations, motivations. So, but they all together should either contradict or agree. And those disagreements don't throw away if they're there, because the data doesn't have to agree. If a person says yes, the area is still protected in terms of the vendor culture, but he fails to explain how it is protected, we note that. Although he feels that there are areas that are still protected in terms of the vendor culture, he failed to make mention or he failed to motivate. Then you need to read in between there when you're analyzing. What does this mean? Is it true that the area is still there? You see, you start having doubt. No, why doesn't he explain or motivate? It means maybe he is not sure. But I was just finalizing a point that if somebody is failing to motivate that quantitative question, then you need to analyze what it means to the findings, what the findings are communicating to you. So now, I think up to now, you need to understand now the difference between quantitative and the difference between qualitative. Qualitative will motivate the quantitative to me, And this is what I've come across. So we can still discuss, but I'm not very good in quantitative research. But today you will see how we play with qualitative analysis. And now we said we're going to do an overview of all the 5 phases. From there, we would go to one of the phases, which is mainly the first phase, and we can unpack it. Now, at the same time, although analyzing qualitative research does not follow any cookbook, neither is it totally undisciplined. And this is the reason why Yin emphasizes the aspect of methodicness, that somebody, there should be a method or stages or a procedure that one follows. And mainly we have been arguing that it will eliminate the element of bias to ensure that the outcomes are rigorous. In fact, practical experience in doing qualitative research, as well as the analytic styles portrayed in numerous texts, suggest that most qualitative analysis, regardless of whether any specialized type of variant of qualitative research is being emulated, qualitative analysis follows a general 5-phase cycle. Previewed next as number 1, compiling, which is what we will focus on today. And we've got the second one, which is disassembling, reassembling, and arraying. And number 4 is interpreting. And the final one is concluding. And if you look at most of the research reports, they do have what you see as presentation of data. In data analysis, what would be distinctive would be presentation of the data. There you will even find verbatim statements or what was reported by your respondents. And second, you would find analysis, analyzing, where you will find interpretation, where the researcher interprets what has been presented, or the responses from the original responses are actually interpreted by the researcher. Now the researcher brings his or her own intuition. That is number 2. But lastly, then there are those conclusions. And sometimes you even make recommendations based on earlier stages. So those 3 are very, very distinct. Concluding remarks and so on, those are very, very distinct. And they are part and parcel, they're included in all these 5 stages. But as we do analysis, then we go stage by stage. You cannot go, and you see what is going to be emphasized today is that these stages are not very what should I say? You know, you might be at a compiling stage, but while you are at stage number 1 of compiling, you find that you even touch interpreting, you touch concluding, you touch reassembling, or you touch deassembling, but most of it, if you are not in stage in stage 5, it will be preliminary, something that is pointing towards conclusion, something that's towards pointing towards interpretation or reassembling, and all those things while you are in stage 1. In other words, there is no time that is going to be said you are only in interpreting or you are only in disassembling. So there will be a to and fro process. That recursive process, that reiterative process is at play. And you will see this author emphasizes this approach that you will be able to go to and fro and fro. So that is how data analysis is. You see, the next slide will depict the complete cycle and its 5 phases, with the arrows showing the sequencing amongst the phases. 2-way arrows imply that you can expect to go back and forth between 2 phases many times. This is what I was trying to explain. As one result, the entire exhibit suggests how analysis is likely to occur in a non-linear. In other words, you don't start from here in a straight line going forward. It's a haphazard, sideways, backwards, forward, sideways, backwards, forward, or whatever on the same spot. So you don't have to go only towards one direction, and you don't start from a specific stage and jump and go to the next one, to the second one immediately. You can be in the first and be in, and also touch the third or the fourth or the fifth. So even if that one is not there. So when I said data analysis it goes by stages, is that all those concepts, all those stages should be evident in what you have done or should have been done. Whether you start with the first one or you start with the last one or whatever you do, I don't know. But the very first point you start doing data analysis, you are compiling. And once you start compiling, all the other stages are also present. In other words, let me put it that way. So, but your experience will tell you how you experience this. And if you have done data analysis, you might have come across this, and you might have your own way of explaining it or seeing it or experiencing it or understanding it. And you don't have to understand it the way the author is saying it or my way, because data analysis is a unique process which is unique to every person. And the way you see it works better for you, that is what you need to do. So now you can see that this in this slide at the center, number 4 is interpret data, and that one has got several arrows onto it. And if you can just look at number 1, where you compile, you see that it also points an arrow back. In other words, while you're compiling, you are interpreting. And you can see that on our far left, or on our far left on the top, we have got disassemble, which is said to be stage number 2. When that happens, then interpretation gives feedback to it. In other words, while we are disassembling, we are also interpreting, but we are compiling database. So these things, they work to and fro, and although they're not a jumble mumble, you cannot expect yourself to carry one activity with the exclusion of the others. In other words, you just do them simultaneously. I might not be able to explain this, but look at what the arrows do. They're talking to you. They're telling you what activities happen and how the interactions do take place amongst the various stages and processes of data analysis. So I don't have a better way. I don't have better words. But these things interact every time. Your formal analysis begins. You see, formal analysis, in our mind, we think that there should be something that is called compiling and sorting the field nodes, amassed, the field nodes that have been amassed from your fieldwork and other data collection. So that should happen. Whether it is I'm starting with it or is there what, it is the first stage that we know it should happen. But however, even before that formal analysis, which is we refer it as compiling and sorting the field data, informal analysis should have started during data collection. And colleagues, you will remember that we were arguing, how does data analysis start before we can collect data? And we tried to explain this, but authors keep on saying that data analysis does not only start at the stage where you have written data analysis and where in your mind you think you are doing data analysis now. That is a formal way, because informally, when you were taking notes, remember, I read from this gentleman, this author, that in one of his chapters that we have used recording data, he said, when you are taking notes, you take notes in the field, but when you go home in the evening, you want to look at your data. What type of data? How have I written it? Sometimes you want to remember the context within which the data collection or the record, the note taking was taking place. You think, no, I did not have a tape recorder, and the tape recorder did not record the actions, the non-verbal activities that were shown by some of the respondents. So at the same time, you might have not even used a memo or having recorded the behavior of the people, because the time was less. You were listening to what they were talking, you wanted to capture, but they were frowning, they were jumping, they were laughing, they were opening their eyes, they were shouting, and so those you sometimes could not capture all of it, because what you are capturing is what was being spoken. But when you are at home and you are thinking about it, but when these people were responding like this, I saw him jumping up and down. I saw him walking down. I saw him putting his hands into his pockets. Or I saw him gazing or opening his eyes. Those things are very, very important in data analysis. And those happen before data analysis. And they happen while you are reviewing and you are looking at the notes that you have taken in the field. While you are at home in the evening. That is an informal way of analyzing data. Now, so we are actually augmenting our explanation how data analysis starts before the formal stage of data analysis that you write in your book. The fact that you have written data analysis later after you've collected, which you think should happen after you have exited the study site, does not mean that data analysis didn't take place in other stages. Because in another author, the other author said, even at the point of inception, when you are still designing the research project, you start to do data analysis. You must remember, this very yin, when he spoke about taking notes, he even made reference to archival sources, things that are written that are found there in the field that need to augment the data that you are collecting. Those might be literature, might be artifacts or other things that are not that are visible but that are not written. So those, if they are written, things from the archives, your books from the archives that support the data, might be related to the literature review that you've done, but you have not could not get hold of that while you were still doing a literature review. But when you went to the field, another professor says, "Oh, are you researching the vendor culture? I've got I've got some important notes that I've taken while I was at the area conducting my research." Then he shows you some journal that he has written. Eh? So you find that while you're in the field. And you find that it is part and parcel of what you should have used in literature review. So your literature and some of those things that are taken as notes in the field would also be related. So data analysis might have started earlier during your design. This is an overemphasis. So, but at that stage of informal analysis, you would have refined your notes nightly. Now, this is what I said. When you come from the field during the night, you refine the notes. You are analyzing. This is what he is saying here. As previously described in section C under recording data, and I've made reference to that. And you might have separately amassed notes about the data in archival sources, and I've referred to that. However, such refining would not necessarily have led to putting your notes into any permanent order, because it was informal and it was tentative. That analysis was tentative, and you wouldn't have said, "I'm analyzing now, let me put it in an orderly manner of analyzing data." That because we're just doing it for the purposes of ensuring that the notes that you have taken in the field do actually make notes. Let me refine them in a way that I would be able to use them future, and future meaning that when I analyze data formally. Now, the first phase is compiling, which is compiling, therefore means formally arranging all the nodes in some useful order. The completed compilation might be considered a database. But the second phase, which is deassembling, it calls for breaking down the compiled data into smaller fragments or pies, which may be considered a deassembling procedure. And I was trying to ponder on this, what this author means by breaking down the compiled data into smaller fragments. And I didn't understand him, but I've got examples of data, and I will be able to show you how data would look like when you come from the field, and then when it belongs to a specific respondent, or when it belongs to a specific theme or a specific research question or sub question that you would be investigating. So you need to decide, a researcher must decide what the assembling activity is and what this packaging into small fragments means to him, in the presence of the data that he would have collected. The procedure may be compared by, might be accompanied by your assigning new labels or codes to the fragments or pieces. Assigning new labels is to give them names, is to name them or to label them or what they are, to name them. So it means those little chunks are then compartmentalized and then they're given labels. Or maybe if we have something that has to speak about economics, then the economics package has got small fragments that are packaged separately. And then the environmental packages are also packaged separately. And the social packages also packaged in that fashion, but in small fragments. And they are labeled as such in accordance to what they mean or in terms of their research question and the findings. The deassembling procedure may be repeated many times as part of a trial and error process of testing and refining labels according for the two-way arrow between these first two phases. You know what happens in data analysis, and I'm going to tell you, this is the experience that I've come across. You can package your statements and you can label them and give them a terminology or a subheading that these are talking about tourism activities. But later on, when you read more about your results, you find that no, man, but those tourism activities were mainly meant to generate economics, the income to the local community. Therefore, it's better for me to put them under the economic activities. Then what type of economic activities did we have at the catchment of Lake Funduzi? We had the lodge operation. We had the tour guide. All of those belong to tourism activities. But you can decide to club them as economic activities. But initially, you could say these are tourism activities. And you see now, that is what repackaging and relabeling them means. So I can classify them like this. Later on, I break them down and then I give them a new label or a new compartment. I compartmentalize them further or I break them further. So this is what would happen. And when you experience this, then you start to understand your study and your results become very clear. And you start to master and to understand the entire mass that you would have collected. And this actually builds you. And this is what education is, because you start to understand the subject matter. And from the view of the respondents, remember, we are talking about qualitative here, where we don't have rigid rules and we don't have answers put up front. We're not testing a hypothesis here. Everything that we're talking about is imagined. These are the things that are coming out from the people that are telling you about what you want to know. So here you start to understand. Your eye starts to open. Oh, at the catchment of Lake Funduzi, when they talk about the economy and when they talk about tourism, their understanding relates to this and that. So you start to understand them in terms of their context as well. This second phase is followed by using a substantive themes. So the substantive themes based on combinations of disassembled items to organize the fragments or pieces into different groupings and sequence than might have been in the original notes. You see now, in the original notes, remember, you're writing things that a respondent is telling you. You might find that the full page is about one respondent. A full page is about one respondent. And that different information is fragmented. But if you take 5 pages from 5 respondents, you can pick up things that talk about tourism in each of the paper. And you can take those and club them together to belong to one. So that when you talk about tourism activities, your paragraph is about tourism activities. That includes lodges, that includes trails, that includes cultural heritage and all those activities. So when you finish a paragraph that talks, or a section or a subtopic that talks about the tourism activities, then you come to social activities. They are also clubbed together. This is what they refer to in here. And here, then you start to create categories, or you start to create groups or subgroups. This is what happens in data collection. I will be able to show you what actually happens, and manually and electronically, because I've got examples that I've tried to produce yesterday in preparation for this workshop. Then you can make your own sense whether you've seen it. And much of it, to me, colleagues, you will see that it's closer to mind map. Mind map is a way of making sense of the things of the world behind you. And then you can play around making all the different structures, making a drawing that shows where a compartment belongs to a higher order and how many compartments fall under a bigger class. And that is how data analysis is all about. We'll talk about it when I show you those examples. This third phase may be considered as reassembling. That is the one that is packaging things that were disassembled in the second phase. The rearrangements and recombination may be facilitated by depicting the data graphically or by arraying them in lists and other tabular forms. We will be able to show this one as we continue. Again, the two-way arrow in slide number 13 suggests how the reassembling and the disassembling phases may be repeated 2 or more times in an alternating fashion. You can reassemble now and deassemble. You can, in other words, you can build a pyramid, then break it again, and build another pyramid again. Breaking it again is disassembling, but building a pillar is what reassembling means. You assemble things that have been broken, the fragments, the fragmented pieces that you've broken from the larger body. So if you have not done data analysis, you won't understand it. But if you have done data analysis, you should be able to understand this. And I'm open for questions and even for comments. You are welcome. Your experience is valued. But the fourth one involves using the reassembled material to create a new narrative with accompanying tables and graphics where relevant. That will become the key analytic portion of your draft manuscript. If it were in quantitative form, then you would see a table indicating how many people have responded like this, or how many here, because it is qualitative. How frequently has this statement appeared in a category or in a subcategory? When we have coded, how many times do we find this statement? So it means that people are emphasizing and people are actually either in agreement or in disagreement. So that is dependent on how the researcher analyzes. So we would have moved from that assembling, and then we moving further to create a new narrative. And this one is supported by the tables or the graphics where relevant. And they are saying this will become a key analytic portion of your draft manuscript. You use it to interpret. In other words, this is what I'm guessing. Okay, this phase may be considered one of the interpreting the reassembled data. Yes, no, actually I was correct. You interpret because you have got the categories. What do they tell you actually? What is the data telling you in terms of the research focus, in terms of the research questions that you have posed at the beginning of the research? There is a main research question and there are the sub questions. Is it responding? What does it say? We have asked the use of the implementation of the 3 pillars of sustainability. Can they enhance community-based natural resources in the SADC? The findings say yes, because they explain that it is possible, and those responses are confirming it. But some responses are vague, they are silent about it. And somewhere I'm going to show to demonstrate to you that this author says even if people are silent about an aspect, it should be noted. You must say it, because other people are going to say a positive thing, others would say a negative thing. But in the middle, you've got people that didn't say anything. Are they skeptical? Or is it a sign that what the left says or what the right says is neither true nor false? Then that is your job, to bring your intuition in here as a researcher. You must interpret and tell us what that means, because this is what data analysis is about. The initial interpretations also may lead to the desire to recompile the database in some fresh way, or to disassemble or reassemble the data differently, all being sequences represented by the respective one-way and two-way errors. Colleagues, they are saying when we interpret, when we make intuition, then it tells us differently. Then we start to see the findings in a different way. And then when we look back on how we deassembled them or how we assembled them, we find that no, man, they were wrongly assembled or they were wrongly deassembled. Then we start to repack them. We deassemble them, we reassemble them, and then we interpret. We deassemble, reassemble, and to and fro repeatedly many times. I don't know how many times. Then it's dependent on how much the researcher is working with the data and how much is coming, is how much he is or she is being enlightened, and how much data, the imaging data, is actually challenging her or him. And that forces the person to go back and change the earlier understanding of the data. Therefore, the interpretation is revised time and again. And the way the data looks, the way it is packaged, and this is how the report writing is. You will revise your report many times based on the new insight. So while you're analyzing data, you might be analyzing data about a specific sub-question. You see, if you're talking about sustainability, you have got 3 pillars. You have got the environmental, you've got the economic, and you've got the social. All of them do talk to each other. You cannot have a sustainable environment that does not support local economies, that does not sustain the lives of the people. Then there is a disjuncture. Then you must streamline, bring your own intuition to say, if the environment, if there is sustainability, then there should be a balance between the 3: economics, environmental, and social. Which one is falling? And if the one leg is falling, we don't have sustainability. There's no break even. Then it means there is a gap. That gap needs to be found in the findings and in the data. And that data you have disassembled or you have assembled or you have interpreted. Please go back and revise it to speak to what you think is unsustainable, or to speak, if you said it is, if you think the data is saying it is unsustainable, but at the end of the day your interpretation is anti-unsustainable, is saying there is sustainability, then there is a disjuncture between your findings and your interpretation. Go back and revise until you say the data says there is unsustainability, and I interpret that unsustainability, I can demonstrate it. If you fail to demonstrate unsustainability in your interpretation, but you think the data is demonstrating unsustainability, then you're not passing the exam. You should not get that PhD. You should not get that master's or that honors. Go back and go and make sense. We must streamline what you find out, and with the ultimate recommendations and conclusions that you make, and the ultimate interpretations. Your recommendations and your conclusions are based on your interpretations, and your interpretations are based on your assembling, your dissembling, and your compiling. All of it at a play at once. When you read how you have compiled it, then it leads you to dissembling. When you read how you have dissembled, it leads you to assembling. And then all this must be streamlined. When I read your report from chapter 1 and to the last chapter, there must be that alignment that we spoke about in one of the workshops. And the results should say, no. The author is not correct. Now, the results are saying this and that. So this is empirical evidence that need to support the study findings. And that leads you to valid conclusions based on your interpretations, based on the data presentations, and based on the data that you did compile. In all these stages, I'm not saying that the other one starts or the other one follows, but they have to be evident in data analysis, and they are evident when you write them as chapters or as sections in your own report, whether you have started dissembling before assembling, or you started data analysis before going to field work, or before gaining interest, gaining entry into the field. It is you who's going to tell us. Write it for us there. And when we read, please don't confuse us. Otherwise, we don't accept your research report, and you won't be able to defend it with a PhD, master's, or honors. So the qualification is not awarded. Please be diligent. The fifth and final phase may be considered one of concluding. It calls for drawing the conclusions from your entire study. And your entire study is aligned, is streamlined, has got those stages. In writing, colleagues, you will show all this. You must show the evidence of these stages must be there in writing. And so that you can make valid conclusions. Whether the other one started or the other one is smaller than or important than the other one, is you who's going to show us. Do show us that one and convince us. Then you're going to get your qualification. Such conclusions should be related to the interpretation in the fourth phase and through it to all the other phases of the cycle. Didn't I say it? I already have said it. So this cements and confirms my argument. Overall, you now should have a preliminary understanding of the 5 phases. Now, when I'm talking now, you should be understanding how the 5 phases work. And if you are confused, debate with me so that we can understand it together. And I don't master it. It should be mastered by you, by the way. You should also now see how they do not follow a linear sequence, but have recursive and reiterative relationships. You know, when I read this statement this morning, even yesterday, I thought that you are going to say, I like the statement of recursive and iterative relationships, because now this is coming from the author. And I emphasize it because it is the nature, it is what characterizes research and is quite enjoyable. If these 2 characteristics are not evident in the process, then maybe we're not talking about undertaking research, scientific research, but the entire analytic process should occur over an extended period of time, weeks, if not months. Now, what do they mean here is that you cannot expect to sit down in one night and write it and say, now I've finished it. You have done shortcuts if you do that. Or you've got conclusions, preconceptions, you've got to prior assumptions that you think this study must achieve, which is not what we want. And we said, if you do that, it is an element of bias that have intruded into the study. We don't want that one. You are going to be accused. Then it's going to take you time, months, take you weeks. For me, it will not take weeks, it will take months, so that I know that I'm satisfied and I must enjoy it and I will be able to defend it. During this time, your exposure to other experiences unrelated to your study might serendipitously or whatever, potentially affect your thinking about one or more of these 5 phases. What they are saying is that some of what we have said here in these phases don't only appear in research, they might appear somewhere else. And this is the reason why I said to you, and I think data analysis is also similar to a mind map. And I've done mind map analyzing other things that are not particularly research. While I was trying to present a process or to clarify some concept to other people, I've used mind maps and I found it. What they're explaining is exactly what I do and what I know. So you might also have a background of things that are related to what we're talking about here. Please do use it as a point of reference. And it's a way in which you can assist yourself to understand data analysis. Not all qualitative researchers attend equally to the 5 phases, colleagues. More experienced researchers may be able to move quickly through all of the first 3 phases and reach the interpretation phase sooner rather than later. Less experienced researchers may give too much attention to the dissembling phase and then struggle with the resembling phase, delaying interpreting and concluding beyond original deadlines or their own patience. I have never, you see, these statements, most of them, these concepts, I'm coming across them now because when I was doing my data analysis, I never knew what disassembling is, but I never knew what reassembling is. But I know interpretation. And I don't know if what I was interpreting was disassembled in my head or when I was doing data, I disassembled and reassembled. But I interpreted and I concluded and I made recommendations. And I know that I presented data. So it means that I did compile my data, I presented it accordingly. But at the end of the day, I did have research reports. And those are my point of reference. And my experience of analyzing data actually resonates. What they're telling me in here, I did experience, but I did not name them what they're telling me. I just know that these activities do happen because I did go to and fro, then package and repackage and think of what does this mean. It is not economic, it's tourism. It's not tourism, it is social. But at the end of the day, I was forced to make a story that does not contradict myself. My chapter 4 should not contradict chapter 5 or 6 or 7. There should be a streamlining. That is what happens in the mind of a person and a person who is researching. And when that happens, education is at its best because a person develops. You gather insights into conducting research and into the study focus. Because the 5 phases will take space to explain, I have somewhat arbitrarily divided them so that this workshop covers the first, not even 3 phases, maybe the first, whereas the next workshop will cover maybe the second and the third, the fifth and the fifth will be covered, and the fourth will be covered in some other workshops. There is, I'm talking about computers now, and pause so that we can debate what I've presented now, that overview. Colleagues, I always downplay the use of artificial intelligence. I know that I've said it before. I know that there are some universities that have forced students to actually use artificial intelligence. They've said you have to use Atlas or NVivo in analyzing your qualitative data. Quantitative, we know, in most instances, you're going to use stats. There's no way that you won't use the software. You have to. But qualitatively, you can use. I've used my head, and I said, if there is, you don't need statistics like I've done long time ago. You can still do it without that thing. And people that are rational are not going to shoot you down because the use of artificial intelligence should be optional everywhere. I don't agree that it should be forced onto people. Because now if we do this, machines are going to write books for us. They're going to conduct research for us, and then we don't develop. We're going to develop to depend on a robot or on a computer. But colleagues, it's optional, I want to say. So there are a lot of them. You see, I say I don't like artificial intelligence, but characters includes Word, Excel, and Access. I did use Word somewhere. Today you will be able to see where I've used Word and where I've used PowerPoint. You will be, yeah, actually today I've used PowerPoint. I'm using PowerPoint here. I will show you how I've tried to package data in a PowerPoint format to try and follow what they are advising us to do when you are compiling data. So I want to stop here. I've gone through, I've done an overview as the first session, as the first section of this session. I've done an overview of all the 5 stages, from compiling data, deassembling, assembling, interpretation, and the last one, concluding. Let me stop and give you an opportunity to engage and interact with the previous slides. Any insight, any comment? People that are in the field, I said, please share your experience. You people who are doing PhD and people that are doing masters, all of you have collected data and have analyzed data. I want your experiences. Use it to engage with this presentation so we can discuss how your views are, how you see it. Do you understand disassembling? Do you understand compiling? Do you understand concluding? Interpretation? How do you see it? How does it affect you? At least, was it important that she was talking about mixed methods? She actually said, posed the question in terms of differentiating between quantitative and qualitative data analysis approaches.
I want to ask something. Thank you for the thought-provoking presentation. It really stimulated our minds. However, I do have a question regarding the exploratory, sequential exploratory design, mixed method design. The literature that I have looked at, they say you start with the qualitative data collection and analysis, and then the findings of that qualitative data, from that qualitative data, is going to determine how you you formulate or you compile your questionnaire or the data collection tool for quantitative. So my question is, when we do the research proposal or the protocol, they wanted us to actually include the interview guide and the questionnaire. So my question is, how would I know the items in the questionnaires are the ones that the participants are going to actually respond? You see, so I'm kind of immature in terms of that. Maybe I can have answer in terms of that. Thank you.
Anybody who wants to say something about it before I can air my views?
I want to try and respond to Moladelo's question. And it also happened with me. I am explanatory sequential design. So when you submit your proposal, they do request that you submit the interview guide. So what I did, I used my research questions as the interview guide, to then put together that interview guide, and the research ethics committee accepted that, and they cleared me, or they approved my ethical clearance. Thank you.
All right, let me come in. See, I actually before this workshop, I always had a challenge when I see a study leader requesting you to provide research questions that will go into the interview guide. Because I say, even before you do chapter 2, your literature, you don't know anything about your research focus. You are not educated on the study focus. But when you finish chapter 2, then you are ready. And when you do chapter 2, you should have had ethical clearance. This is the contradiction that you are saying. And this is what you feel I'm contradicting. And I can stand in front of a professor and even a vice chancellor. I can tell them, a person cannot give you true and valid research questions before they go to the field. So exploratory research, sequential researcher cannot give you valid questions, quantitative questions. Where will she get them? Because she has not collected data that should inform her. Now, but let me tell you what research allows. It allows you to project the outcomes of your research. And that is why when you're writing an article, just at the beginning of your, even when you do a purpose statement, there, you can even project what you think the outcomes of the research will be. This is based on your world views, and this is based on the literature that you have read. You then project. This is just tentative. It's just when you are analyzing data. If you are at the compiling stage and you are still collecting data, you have not started analyzing it, those notes that you do during the night, they give you tentative conclusions and tentative interpretations. The university is actually not telling you that these questions are tentative, because when you go and analyze your qualitative data from exploratory sequential, you can find that they differ from what the findings don't want you to continue with those questions. They point you towards different questions. You see, now I'm supporting your university, but I also say that if it was me, I wouldn't. If I was an ethical committee, I wouldn't even want that. But I think they've got a reason why they want that, because they want to investigate if you are very cautious with the ethics, if your questions are not going to offend or to cause harm to the respondents. So you can only get the real questions after that analysis of qualitative data.
But I'm interested in how you approached yours. You said you did it manually, and my question is, how did you approach your measures of trustworthiness, in particular the confirmability?
You see, I think I didn't do very difficult. You see, my questions were very. Actually, I didn't even think that statistic existed by then. And I just wanted to know the basics about the feelings of the people. How How much? Only that. And I know that in quantitative research, there's that need for objectivity. Those things, I don't know if they prevailed in my study or not. Now, I did not even test it now after I've finalized. But the only thing that I know is that my quantitative data was supported by my qualitative data, and there were a lot of disagreement. And maybe I went away with murder. I don't know if the study leaders did not see it, but I was not good at quantitative. I'm still not good. That confirmability that you're talking about, and for me, it was not part of what I tried to ensure. Maybe the methodology ensured itself, or maybe they thought that although does not exist in exactly, but at least I'm there 70% or 60%, so they passed me. I don't think I'm not very proud that I've done good or whatever, but I think I've done the basics. That is why I always run away from quantitative things. But you see, I don't necessarily reject artificial intelligence, because in terms of quantitative research, you have to statistically analyze with the use of a software. That one, I do agree. But qualitative, this NVivos and your Atlas, they are taking away my mind, and they're robbing me of my creativity. But those that use it is fine, and it is acceptable and scientifically. But you have got a lot of work, because they don't finish everything. After they've interpreted for you, you validate, you make sure that indeed there is alignment and the interpretation is correct. So you've got more work to do than a person who did not use artificial intelligence. Because with me, if I move straight manually, I'm not going to learn how NVivo interprets, and I'm not going to validate anything afterwards. Once I go straight and there's alignment, my results, my interpretation, my conclusions, then I'm done. There's more work if you use artificial intelligence. But I don't play it on my side. But those people that like it, I think they can continue with it, because you can't stop development. That is development. Technology is the order of the day. Okay, this is the first stage, and I think in this one I'll be able to jump to and fro, and when the time disappears, I will be able to go to areas where I think I need examples. I'm going to take my cell phone so that I can see the time here while we are talking. It will assist us to time to know that we are done. Now, colleagues, the first phase in the analytic cycle, we said, is compiling things. They say is an essential prelude to the analysis of any qualitative data. And what it means is you cannot analyze data if you don't compile it. And I want to also tell you that don't think that while you're compiling, you have excluded all the other phases that we've been spoken about. The time you start touching and compiling, other stages fall in, and you're doing them simultaneously. But we need to unpack how you behaved in dealing with the data. Then you have behaved in a compiling way, you have behaved in a disassembling way, you have behaved in an assembling way, you have behaved in an interpreting way, and you have behaved in a concluding way. If I've said that, then you would understand there is a reiteration that takes place, go forward, backwards, go forward, backwards. But recursive means you can only conclude if you have interpreted. You will never conclude if you did not interpret. Or you can have preliminary conclusion while you're still compiling, or while you're still interpreting, or while you're still disassembling, but that is not final. But then when you dedicate your time on the process of concluding, then you're looking at everything that has happened while you were dealing with the data in the entire study, and you are bringing it to finality. And that is what conclusion means. And it is based mainly on your findings. Please don't forget that your findings are based on your literature. Okay? And remember, your literature is a big component that has set background for your study, because it has made you aware of the study focus and all the gaps and all that has been done. And when you collect data now, the data is going to confirm your literature, or it is going to contradict with it, or it's going to improve on it. And that is how you contribute to the body of knowledge. But colleagues, everything is based on the research question, the problem, and the topic. And that is why we talk of alignment. You conclude. You see, at the conclusion, the possibility is you might find that what you thought at the beginning is different from what you think now. Actually, that is what happens with most of the studies, because people would have preliminary assumptions. Then if they don't force the study to follow those assumptions, then at the end of the study, the possibility is it is actually different. You will find that what you thought it is at the beginning actually reveals itself not to be true, because the reality has emerged, particularly because an emergent process in qualitative research actually improves your understanding. That is inductive. Colleagues, the phase may be likened, this first phase of compiling may be likened to one of creating a database. This is a term that does not customarily appear in qualitative research textbooks. Database is not mainly used in qualitative studies. Most of the textbooks, nevertheless, seem to assume that researchers will have compiled their field notes and other notes and evidentiary materials in some orderly fashion. The importance of this assumption leads to the need to recognize the desired end result more formally. For this reason, the suggestion to create an orderly set of records or database seems appropriate. The objective is to organize your qualitative data in a systematic fashion before formal analysis starts, not unlike straightening your desk and organizing your files before starting on an assignment. More orderly data will lead to stronger analysis and ultimately to more rigorous qualitative research. At a minimum, such organizing helps researchers to find and access their own field notes and materials. More beneficially, such organizing helps with data analysis. Although not everyone uses a formal label such as a database, anyone who has successfully completed a qualitative research study will likely have undertaken some kind of organizing effort and will have created a functional database. Once organized and therefore compiled, the data may be considered your database. Useful ways of organizing the data are discussed next. Here it's just a cementing, showing that you cannot analyze things that are not in order, because you want to create order, you want to create a meaning, a logic, and that logic comes from things that are orderly arranged. You are going to hunt for statements. You're going to hunt for meanings. The meaning should have been packaged so that you extract it and make sense of it. Whether you are deassembling, you are interpreting, you are assembling, it should be found in an orderly manner. If it is in a list, let it be in a list. In a table, let it be in a table. If it is in a graph, let it be in a graph. So you can go and extract and use the data when you're analyzing. So that is what they are cementing. So there are now ways which they propose are ways of arranging it. The other one is parallel to quantitative research. It's similar to what quantitative researchers do. In quantitative research, for an example, a database usually consists of an electronic file containing discrete records. And this is the reason why the researcher says the statement, the terminology of database or concept is mainly used in quantitative research than in qualitative research. Each record has a uniform set of fields with data entered into each field. I'll be able to show you what I've done here. And it's not exactly quantitative, but it is qualitative. It does have those fields. A data dictionary it has got the equivalent of the fields. A data dictionary then contains the definition of each field and precisely defines its possible entries. Before the database can be used, the data needs to be cleaned and verified by checking the logic, consistency, and accuracy of the entries of data in each record. So here, now, the previous speaker says, how did I verify? Did you say, how did I verify? Here, there is the database can be used to clean and to verify, to ensure that there is logic, there's consistency and accuracy of the entries or data in the record. That is in quantitative research. But in qualitative research, the researcher may rely on analogous functions and nearly parallel procedures equivalent to what we have said about quantitative research databases, whether the qualitative database is to be electronic or non-electronic, as I've used. The main difference compared to quantitative analysis is likely to be that of textual. The other one will be numerical, the other one will be textual. And data are to be ordered in some systematic manner. So you can organize textual data in qualitative form in a systematic manner, in a way that numerical data is systematically arranged in terms of quantitative research. In qualitative analysis, a glossary can help to define the important terminology found in the qualitative text, assuring their consistent use. The glossary's role may be similar to the use of a data dictionary in quantitative analysis. And I've got an example of a glossary that I developed this morning so that I can remind you that it's just the definition of terms. What do you think your statements mean in the context of your research? If you talk about the private sector, if your respondents refer to a private sector, what are you going to refer to? What is your explanation? When you analyze data, what would the private sector mean or entail? So throughout, this definition is a working definition. This is actually operationalization of definitions now. You see, now it means a working definition for a private sector is non-governmental organizations that are involved in Cybanerian. Therefore, even if somebody does not say private sector, but he explains in a way that he or she refers to non-governmental organizations that are involved in Cybanerian, then it means the same thing as private sector. That is how you're gonna ensure consistency, logic, and you would ensure alignment and consistency throughout the study. So the same applies to all the other concepts. In your study, they would mean what you think the glossary has defined in the way that the glossary has defined them. So they are recommending that we need to have glossary instead of a dictionary, database dictionary that quantitative researchers use. Precisely, how formal you make your compiled set of qualitative data, it depends on your own preferences and style of work. You may load your data into electronic set or records, or grouping the records according to meaningful sets of files. You also may store your data in a non-electronic medium, as we have done ourselves, reorganizing them into a set of old-fashioned indexed cards that has been used on several occasions in the past. More important than its formality or format is the attention and care with which you complete your data, so that you avoid the element of bias. You ensure correctness. Now, I just want to show you how we have done it in the past and without using electronic or digital or artificial intelligence. That this is a mind map, colleagues. And if I'm talking about SADC, Community-Based Natural Resource Management, CBNRM. And there you can see that I've got economic on my far left, and in the middle I've got governance, which is equivalent to social, and in my far right I've got conservation. And under all of them are under SADC. But under governance, you have got 3 blocks. All of them have got some information inside. The same applies to the far left. Under economic development, you've got 3 circles. All of them have got information that relates to the economics of community-based natural resource management. The other one relates to the governance. So different aspects. These are chunks that the data can be divided into. I don't know if this is what we can refer to as label, but I did not label them on the side. I didn't indicate that this is about tourism or this is about lodges or whatever. Otherwise, I would have labeled them in that fashion. So you could see the concept of labeling and the concepts of, I don't know if this is dissembling or this is assembling, but this is the way how data analysis, the format that data analysis can follow. There are different ways of doing it. This is not the only way, and this is not the correct way or the wrong way, but it is one way in which it can be done. I just did this to show you that with a mind map, it is possible. You see, you might have seen something like this. This is a pyramid, and I refer to it as a mind map because it reminds me, it actually compartmentalizes, it actually cuts my data into different categories, into different sub blocks that are small ones here. And the bigger one there is a big grouping or a big category, or I don't know whether that is the equivalent to a research question. But the answers are those small round circles below there. And I've shown them with arrows. So we can debate them when I pause. Let me run and show you how we can arrange our data in electronic format. Now, artificial intelligence or digital or whatever. Let me show you. But colleagues, this is the question that I have for the example that I'm going to show you. This example is on community-based natural resources management in Southern Africa. Then the research question, which is overarching, is can the implementation of the principles of sustainable development enhance community-based natural resource management within the South African development community? Then I've got the three sub-questions that I've posed as an example. In which way are the natural resources conserved in the SADC? 2, does the community enjoy economic benefits from the management of the natural resources? Who is in charge of the management of community-based natural resource management in the SADC or South African Development Community? All these three questions are going to be answered in the next slides that I'm going to show you. Bear them in mind. Remember them. I'm going to open another arrangement, the compilation of the data, even before I could disassemble or before I could even interpret or assemble it. I'm going to show you how I've arranged and organized the data, because the data was like this, scattered all over. This is person number 1 or participant number 1 who has responded. And he has responded in terms of the economics, the governance, and the environment. And all of the responses are based on these three questions and that overarching question. So it is participant number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All of them have got their own responses differently. They responded in a different way, but they were responding to the same questions. So all through, we think they should respond and touch on the questions that were asked. And I want to show you how I've taken their responses and compiled them in an orderly fashion so that interpretation can be started. Here, you can see that on my far left, I've got role players. In other words, I've got respondents. So I've sampled from the 6 participants. I've responded 3. 3 of them have answered in terms of economic development. You can see number 1 has got something written there in terms of economic development. And he or she has got something about governance there, line number 1 there. Even in terms of environmental conservation, there he or she has responded something, but I did not make comment based on what she has responded. The same applies to number 2. Number 2 has got economic, has got governance, has got environment. No, environment number 2 does not have. So he or she is silent about that. Oh, did not have anything to say about environmental dimension in terms of community-based natural resource management. Then number 3 answers in terms of development, governance, environmental. And this is what should help me to actually interpret the data. But this is the first stage of compiling. Then I compile the data. And in other words, I'm saying number one, respondent number one said employment and broader community development satisfaction, community experience in terms of economic development. Then he says something government, says something environmental. The same applies to all of them and to different questions. Remember, these responses, all of them are based on the specific questions, because the questions were on economic development, I told you, and governance, I told you, and environmental, I told you. Those three which I said you must remember, but all of them, they lead to answering the overall research question, which I posed there earlier on. And colleagues, if this confuses, I will stop so that we can engage with it. But this is what I see and understand the manner in which data compiled should be done and how it has been compiled. It is in terms of the responses of it is in terms of the source. It is in terms of the source, because all what is in line number one is from the respondent number one, and in line number two is from the source, which is respondent number two, and in line number three is from the source, which is respondent number three. So they said we can arrange and compile our data in terms of the source. Now I'm going to show you the other way of arranging the responses. Is in terms of the theme or things of aspect or the research question that was responded to. And this is the economic development data record. And there I can show you what all of the three respondents have said in terms of the economic development. So I don't have governance, don't have natural resources. And these are different ways in which you can package your responses or package your data so that you can start analyzing. They have advised us we can do it in these two ways. And I want to pause now because I see that we are left with no minute, and I want you to engage because this is very important. This is very fundamental, especially in this workshop where we are starting to look at data analysis. And I wish we had more time to actually continue and do the rest of this initial stage of compiling. And I don't know how we will do it, because in other workshops, when I did not finish, I did not go back and finish. But this one is very, very important, because the conclusion, the finalization of the study is dependent on the data that is there. And if you don't finish analyzing it, actually you don't finish the study. But this is still the very first stage that we talk about. And let me pause if you want to say something about it before we can call it a day.
Doc.
Yes.
It's just my question that I want to ask, and I need assistance on.
Yes.
I submitted my proposal, and then they requesting that I must submit my chapter 3 methodology.
Yes.
For the ethics into how I design my data collection instruments. So I wanted to check if there is any template of how should it be done before I can do my own things. To find that maybe I do it the way I understand it, maybe it's incorrect whatsoever. So if I can have any assistance on that one, that is there. Because if I look into chapter 3, the one for methodology is having so much things that are there, the research design, the population, the criteria, the sizes, the data collection tool, because I'm gonna use the qualitative and all those things, the analysis. Do I include everything on that, or is there only a specific things that they need to see when I do my ethical application? Thanks.
I think the majority of you have done data collection tools, either questionnaires or interview guides. He is asking about those. Is there a format to do those? Or how do we do it? Anybody who wants to share an experience? People that are collecting data already should be having interview guides or questionnaires. He wants to understand how to develop an interview guide. Is there a specific structure or a format? What can you say about it? If you have got a comment, say it now.
What I can advise is looking at how to design a questionnaire or an interview guide. It's based, just like Gidi mentioned, it must follow your research objectives and your research questions. And then if you have attempted to apply for ethics, if you go into the ethics the ethics application online, there's a section where you can access a template, but that template you populate with your own questions. Let me try and attach. I'll see if it's successful. I'll attempt to attach on the chat. This is from the ethics, so it's just a foundation, but you need to populate with your own answers. I mean, with your own questions. Sorry, yeah, it's been a bit of a long day today. That's why I'm not very vocal.
Okay.
Okay, I've put my email there under your question there. You can email to me.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, sharing is caring. I think it's best if we, so that at least whoever else might need. Yeah, I believe in at least so that everybody can have access.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, and it's fine. Also, if you look at some study reports do have interview guide or questionnaires as appendices. All of mine, I think all of mine do have this, and I might have shared some in the past, but Nomhle will share what she has. That structure or template. Anybody who wants to say anything now before we?
And thank you for participating, and thank you, Dr. Kurumi, for your contribution. Enjoy your evening till next time. Thank you.